Okay, this video is the decline and fall of Western art, and here is the book, The Decline and Fall of Western Art. Here is the author, where I can get my finger up here, Brendan M.P. Hurd. I thought it was a very good book. This is the painting, one of the paintings talked about in the book, and this is the fall of the last days of Pompeii. But what this picture really reminds you, if you studied history and the Greeks at all and the Romans, this reminds one of, Aeneas carrying his father out of burning Troy. And the message there is that the young man has to preserve the memory of his father, which in our case, and relevant to this book, is the memory of Western civilization, of Western culture. Western culture is amazing. It is great. It is the most amazing artistic, musical culture, scientific, you could name it. It's amazing. And people don't know about it. Most modern people are completely clueless. And modern art is a disgusting insult of a joke. It's the emperor's new clothes. It's a piece of crap. And anyways, I just want to share with you a few points from this book because it's a very clever book. So this is a book review of this Decline and Fall of Western Art by Brendan Hurd. Okay, so here's just some quotes from the book. It was from 2017. It's self-published at Amazon.com. I got news for you. A lot of the best books are self-published because a self-published author can say whatever they want and they write good stuff. Whereas the publishing companies are always going to make you follow their formula and code, and they do all kinds of things to decrease the quality of a book. But what a publisher is good for is to market a book. Okay, so anyways, Brendan Hurd, here's his first quote. Those of us who are aware of what is happening now will need to work very hard to preserve what still remains of the real art heritage, as modernism shows no signs of stopping in its destructive march. Modernism and postmodernism have no sensible practical difference whatsoever. Postmodernism is just an invented category to pretend that there's some type of movement beyond modernism. Today, traditional art is associated with patriarchy, oppression, despite its objective excellence. The old art is great. It's awesome. Such a philosophy is guaranteed to be the champion of mediocrity and decline. So how do we reclaim our rightful vitality? The first step is we must acknowledge that we are in decline. We must publicly complain about the nonsensical modern art galleries. Currently, Europeans are scarcely permitted to acknowledge their history and culture. A people's art represents their soul. Art is an indication of a society's health. Like the outward signs of health in the body, the beauty of art reflects a culture's fitness. For the true artist of today, there is no outlet at all to speak of, let alone to flourish within. When you see a Greek sculpture, you sense immediately the greatness of the underlying civilization and its philosophy. You ask yourself, who made this? I'm trying to find a quick picture of a Greek sculpture in this book. You just see it's beautiful. The Greeks, the ancient Greeks, were so brilliant. Here, I don't know if it'll show up on this web camera. You can get a sense of it there. It's beautiful. And here's what he says. What is the mystery of this achievement? You know that you have been a witness to the artistically superhuman, and that realization can never be unseen. You know, too, in an instant, the near impossibility of surpassing the maturity of that idealism, and setting this near impossibly high standard as the goalpost of excellence has been antiquity's greatest gift to the legacy of Occidental. Occidental means Western art. This is the track whereon was set the locomotive of Promethean achievement. And again, this is all Brendan Hurd from his book, Decline and Fall of Western Art. So, you've seen probably these old sculptures of just this sort of fat blob of a lady with big breasts, big butt, and all that. And you say to yourself, a child could have made that. Anybody could have made that. But you look at this Greek sculpture and you know you could never do that. That takes a ton of skill, which you just don't have. And that's real art. And he calls this, could a child have made this? He calls that the test of modern art. If you look at something, you say, a child could have done that, or, some low-functioning person could have done that, then that's not real art. That's just nonsense, all right? Really, quality art is something that it takes a lot of skill to produce. More quotes from Brendan Hurt. And what he's basically saying is it is a terrible insult to our culture, and we've allowed this to go on for too long to say that this modern art is something real and represents us in some way. No, it only represents how stupid modern people are to put up with this crap, and how the typical dummy is a conformist and will accept something if some phony so-called expert says it's good. They're not able to judge for themselves. They're not able to trust their own instincts in making a judgment. Okay, Brendan Hurt continues. The fine art critic with his verbose obfuscation is the true modern artist of our artless wasteland, talking nice-sounding nonsense that confuses people and disguises garbage as highbrow intellectual sleight of hand. In the book The Painted Word, 1975, by Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe was a good author, and he's funny and he's clever. Tom Wolfe crafted the thesis that under modernism, art is no longer a visual experience, but rather a literary experience, because the art stinks, and the only reason it has any credibility whatsoever is some phony so-called expert says a bunch of bogus nonsense about it that sounds fancy, okay? By redefining art, the tradition has become defunct. The modernist movement has made a farce out of a once proud genre of art and out of beautiful cities, their art galleries, concert halls, books, and cultures. Tom Wolfe, quote, "The notion that the public accepts or rejects anything in modern art is merely fiction. The game is completed and the trophies distributed long before the public knows what has happened." And they call this like a language, art speak, of how people talk about modern art. And I'll tell you something, whenever I see, because I've watched a whole bunch of art courses, whenever I see the art teacher talking about modern art and pretending it's real and significant, I completely lose respect for that person. They're a sellout, they're a liar, and you should not respect them, okay? Modern art is garbage, okay? Picasso sucks. Take a look at Picasso's Cubism, take a look at his statues. It's all crap. He was a member of the Communist Party, and he just played along because he can make a lot of money out of it, okay? Kandinsky's a phony, Pollock is a phony. All of these modern artists are phony. It's all crap. There's nothing good, not even 1%. It's 0%, okay? It's just a big lie, and anybody who tells you otherwise is a liar or a chump. Okay, so here he calls this the could a child have done this test, which could be applied to Kandinsky. And he says they just play around with words to try to pretend something's happening. It's all crap. And the root goal is that actually, what are they trying to do? They're trying to destroy respect for the real art of Western culture and tradition. Okay? So, you know, the typical stupid person tries to pretend they're sophisticated by appreciating modern art. The reality is they're stupid to pretend to like it. It's a sign of somebody who's a phony ignoramus and doesn't even trust their own confidence. Picasso won a Peace Prize from Stalin. What a joke that is. Like an oxymoron. Okay, Brendan Hurt continues. To have allowed into the core of our advanced civilization these obvious lies has been a tremendous and suicidal foolishness. Is it any wonder we now find ourselves a self-loathing civilization, whitewashing its own glorious history? Expressionism, Dadaism, Cubism, abstract expressionism, they're all the same thing. Modernism is a philosophy whose goal is to destroy European culture itself by redefining art as something nonsensical. What would the mighty Vitruvius, the great architect of Rome, what would he think if he saw what we've done to our cities? He would decry us as the most decadent and deformed society that has ever existed. You know, my own little quote here. Could you imagine if the Renaissance artists came to America, like Michelangelo and Raphael, later Caravaggio, and they wanted to look at, you know, the crap in our modern art galleries? They would laugh at us and say, there has been no progress. We've gone backwards. They would think we were all mentally retarded for putting that crap in a museum. It's ridiculous, okay? Okay, Brendan Hurt continues here from his book. Modernist architecture is worse than modernist painting because you can't avoid modernist architecture. It's, you know, out there in the streets rather than being just in a museum. The great majority will suppress anecdotal experience, self-analysis, or even historic fact and objective knowledge if it conflicts with majority opinion or might make things in any way socially uncomfortable. Now, my little intercession here, I actually think that's a sign of high intelligence. Anybody that can go against conventional opinion, because most people can't. The average stupid person, whatever is the accepted standard, they just go, okay, well, that's what it is. Is a sign of being intelligent, that you respect your own thoughts, your own judgment, your own experience. But sadly, most people are not able to do that, and that's why these phony so-called experts in modern art are able to have so much influence on them. And that's also why people who are able to recognize it as a bunch of garbage, Emperor's New Clothes, should say something to the dummies and help inform them, because it drags down our entire society if we let this kind of nonsense continue. It's important that people are able to recognize truth, recognize beauty and goodness, have an accurate judge of these things, and be able to say the truth. You know, like George Orwell says, if you can say 2 + 2 = 4, everything else can follow from there. All right? Okay, Brendan Hurd continues in his book, Decline and Fall of Western Art. Modernism has been with us so long, but remains so patently false that subjecting people to it is now a strange litmus test for judging how easily they will accept what they are told. While now branded as an evil, judgmentalism is in fact necessary and good, leading to refined tastes and ascending high culture. Yeah, we have to judge things, and we have to discriminate all day long. That is good, that is not good. I'm attracted to this person, I'm not attracted to this person, or whatever the subject is. It's obvious that we constantly have to make judgments all day long. And a person who's not able to judge is easily vulnerable to being a victim of nonsense. Okay? And when Brendan Hurd continues, and to use even more taboo terms, despite all we have been taught, brainwashed, discrimination is morally right, if only because it is an unavoidable aspect of reality and human nature. Yeah, you have to be able to determine what is good or bad in order to be able to seek the good. Okay, Brendan Hurd continues, ultimately the average person is overly swayed by perceived authority. Major media outlets control public opinion largely by presenting themselves as representing public opinion, rather than the reality is they're just shaping public opinion. Modernism is not harmless. It is either a symptom of the death stage of civilization, or more likely, it is the cause of that death. Relativism is in art and actual painting is now labeled realism or illustration. Okay, so what is he trying to say there? People who are really doing art, trying to paint and draw things as accurate portrayals of reality, as we've seen in traditional art, they're now criticized for saying, oh, that's just illustration, as if it wasn't something highly skilled. No, it's very highly skilled. And then he goes on to say, I have been touched how the words racist and sexist alone, despite being essentially meaningless, contain now enough power of suggestion to permanently destroy civilization itself. Safeguarding our specific culture as extended family is the ancestral inheritance that we have been entrusted with. That is the natural love, the love of our parents, our children, our spouses, our community and heritage. Our decay is fast approaching its nadir, when we must choose to be self-affirming again or dissipate into nothingness. Yeah, so the wonderful Western culture tradition of magnificent art, the best art in the world. There is no art even close. If you know of anything remotely close to the quality of Western art, I would love to see it. Put it in the comments. I'll be happy to look at it. I'll make a video in the future if it actually really exists. Now, I know, I've seen some Asian paintings of tea gardens that were rather pretty and nice, but they don't compare, in my opinion, with Michelangelo or Raphael or Caravaggio or the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood or so many of these other great artists. The skill level, I won't even get into all that right now, but okay, let's continue with Brendan Hurd. He says, it is much easier for modernists to teach children our civilization is not worth saving when they only see boring glass box buildings, soul-crushing industrial estates, and bookshelves of narcissistic chick-lit. Okay? Here's a quote by a different expert on art. This is R.H. Ives Gammell from Twilight of Painting. He says, the ultimate importance of modern painting in the history of art will be seen to lie in the fact that it discredited and virtually destroyed the great technical traditions of European painting, laboriously built up through the centuries by a long succession of genius. The loss of these traditions has deprived our potential painters of their rightful heritage, a heritage without which it will be impossible for them to give full scope to any talent that they may possess. So yeah, what it's basically saying is, in the old days, for example, you used to have a lot of family farms and the kids would grow up knowing how to farm. Whereas nowadays, hardly anybody farms. So, there's not many people maintaining those skills of farming, other than the sort of industrial farms. So the point is, not enough people are drawing and trying to maintain the traditions of the trade of drawing. Maybe it's going to be a long time if this art ever comes back to the level of quality that it usually previously had. In all other aspects of art, this is Brendan Hurd continuing, of Western art, literature, and music, the trend and the message is the same. Modernism's goal is degeneration. Now I'm going to add in my own thoughts right here. This is what I mean by the destruction of culture by atheism. And atheism really means sort of atheistic Darwinism on the path to communism. It says that life is meaningless, that humans are just talking monkeys. And if that's your way of looking at the world, you have no motivation to create art. You have no reason to respect art. All you want is to try to become a member of the Communist Party and have your own personal slaves, okay? That's not a good worldview to create a nice, wealthy country, all right? So modernism's goal is degeneration. Modernism is a visual art philosophy whose goal is to destroy European culture itself. And that's an important point. Modern art is not just harmless garbage. It is a tool that is being used to destroy the great art of Western civilization. And people should be aware of that. It's actually an evil thing, and I think it's often used for money laundering. It's a bad thing. And if you've got kids and you see modern art, you should tell them that is garbage, that is crap. Don't ever be fooled by this crap. You should emphasize that so the kids grow up with a proper ability to judge something. Modernism thrives in a totalitarian victory over Promethean men. A trusting population simply does not expect to be deceived by its authority figures. The core purpose of nearly every Western institution has been inverted in this way, and the real purpose of even having art institutes to begin with has been destroyed, and that is to preserve the continuation of good art and literature. It's been lost. Despite how it looks on the surface, modernism is not harmless. It is either the symptom of the death stage of civilization or the cause of it. Okay, so yeah, it's a big deal. And what he's also saying is this modern art garbage is also corrupting, the movie theaters, the literature, and the music. So don't be a chump. Don't approve of it, and teach your kids that it's garbage. So show them the good old stuff, and hopefully they'll learn about it. And also, all this stuff is like a culture of death. You'll notice that anything that's sort of anti-family, anti-children tends to be subsidized or promoted or encouraged in our society versus anything about traditional family, intact marriages, man and woman, loving each other and taking care of their child. That's all mocked and discouraged, okay? And I can tell you, I see a lot of young women, and they all think their career is super important and having kids is some incidental, secondary thing in the back burner. But you know what? That biological clock gets ticking in their 30s, and I know lots and lots of nice young women who are infertile, can't have a baby, and they're very sad about it. And I know a lot of women that are older, late 40s, 50s, 60s, and older, and I can tell you, the joy of their life is their baby. I've never met a woman with a child who the kid wasn't the joy of their life compared to everything else. Plus also, when people are in their 20s, it's exciting to have a job and see your friends every day and see what's new. But you do the same thing for 10, 15 years and you realize it's going nowhere. And, that you could be fired in 2 seconds. They'll just replace you with somebody else the same day. So what I'm trying to say is they realize that, to their kids, their mom is the most important person in the whole world. To their job, a typical person, man or woman, they're usually just doing some task that somebody else can do in 5 seconds, and it doesn't have that much. You need to make money to do your job, but what I'm trying to say is family should be up here, and for most people, jobs should be there, relatively speaking. You know what I'm saying? The family has been denigrated. It's been put much lower than. So I showed that all that stuff is leading to a tomb, the island of death. And then here's a much better place to go to, the island of life. Okay, so this is finishing up the last slide here in this talk about Brendan Hurd's book, The Decline and Fall of Western Art. To attempt to unbalance the gender roles is to go against nature, which is to invite death. And that is what we have done. So in his opinion, trying to make a man like a woman or a woman like a man is not healthy for society, and he feels that might lead to the society's eventual premature extinction. Brendan Hurd then, after saying that, he continues, he said that the most great art is produced by men in painting, sculpture, architecture, and literature. And in his opinion, he thinks that women are too conformist and he thinks that they tend to be more likely to go along with whatever authorities tell them to. And he says that women will only defend art and culture if it's socially popular to do so. He feels that women are more hesitant than men to speak up and defend culture and Western civilization when it's not popular to do so. And he says that a culture will only survive if men support it. And he actually thinks perhaps that's why Christian men are scapegoated nowadays in effort to destroy Western civilization. Because if you can scapegoat the men and disempower them and they can't speak up about the benefit of Western civilization, it'll be easier to get rid of Western civilization. And I do kind of see that happening nowadays, that there's this big push to promote atheism and to say that all of Western civilization is a bunch of crap. And if people will buy into that, then it'll be easy to make them accept communism. And then all of a sudden, they'll be living like a bunch of farm animals and treated the same way, and they'll be like, oh, what happened? Okay, so anyways, Brendan Hurd continues. He said the Renaissance was largely fueled by a rediscovery of pagan texts and philosophies forgotten by the masses, but kept alive by the Christian monks. Yeah, the Christian monks. There's a book by Thomas Cahill called How the Irish Saved Civilization. It's a good book. And a lot of the Irish monks, working around in monasteries, they kept all the old books so that they could be rediscovered by a wider number of persons around the time of the Italian Renaissance. Okay, this is Brendan Hurd continuing. The poetic oral tradition was a bridge to ancestor worship from the time of Pericles back to the walls of Troy. The Greeks gave us the formula for artistic beauty. We will not regain our culture or art of any sort until we earnestly undergo a religious revival to reclaim a metaphysical view, even a rational one, as the kernel of creativity. There is a slowly dawning realization amongst artists and philosophers that we cannot live without a metaphysic. Okay, so what is he basically saying there? I'm going to interject a little here. A lot of people will mock religion and tradition, but guess what? They suck, okay? If you have an artist who doesn't respect the family or traditional art, traditional history, and Western culture, they're not going to be able to produce anything better on their own. They stink, okay? So, that's one of the reasons, too, I've recognized that if you want to be a great artist, a great writer, a great music composer, why wouldn't you look at the best art, the best music, the best architecture, the best books ever written, and that's going to take you to the Christian tradition. It just is. If you know anything compatible, fine, I'll take a look at it, but I studied this stuff for decades, and it's so much better than everything else. It's not even funny. To throw away the best mankind has ever done in art, literature, music, and architecture, that would be stupid. Okay, so Brendan Hurd continues. Here he goes. When we individually or as a society determine that human religion is not true and do away with the concept of God, it seems we cannot do so without leaving behind what is best in us. If you get rid of God, then life is philosophically meaningless. And if life is philosophically meaningless, how does that motivate you to create any art? How does that inspire you to create art or to learn about it or anything? We vividly see in our artworks of today, according to Brendan Hurd, all of which are failures. Modern art's a failure completely. The loss of the spiritual element. The direct relationship between spirituality and art is fundamental. We need to believe in ourselves to have an art. So here's a big question. Can Western civilization be saved? Is it too late? Are we inevitably headed to the island of death and the destruction of Western civilization? Or can we save it? And it's only going to come if there's going to be a religious revival. You can say whatever you want. You study art, you study history, and you will see that is the case. So Brendan Hurd continues. Puppet masters do not want art or ideas. They want tactless strip mall populations of spiritless drones, and our tradition is not gone from us. It is only hidden from us. It can be revived. So that's Brendan Hurd from The Decline and Fall of Western Art. A very good, interesting book, and he's right spot on correct in his assessment of modern art as a fake insult and a joke, and we should not put up with it, and we should learn and respect and appreciate all the traditional art, and if teach our kids how to draw, and respect people doing real art. So anyways, that's it. Hope that was interesting or helpful.